The moment the ruling came down, the world seemed to tilt. A polished gavel, a cool voice from the bench, and a conclusion that landed like iron: Willow would not go home. The judge's language was clinical: a flight risk, remanded pending trial, transport to Pentonville, but what those words really meant was a concrete door closing and the loud vacuum of family life yanked away. Pentonville devours certainty. It refashions time into noise and echoes, turns every breath into a negotiation with whatever danger happens to be standing nearest. For Willow, who has spent so many months dangling between love and obligation, recovery and relapse, this was not merely a setback. It was exile. She stepped into the chain of custody with her jaw set and eyes dry, determined to hold herself together because the people she loved demanded it. But even determination can splinter under fluorescent lights and the measured rattle of keys. Pentonville is not a setting so much as a living organism with 1,000 small hungers. Hallways carry rumors faster than guards carry flashlights. Bedsprings remember arguments. The cafeteria smells like cheap coffee and old grievances. What Willow brought with her grief, her fury, her desperate impulse to control what little could be controlled, marked her like chalk on dark cloth. She has survived worse, or so she tells herself, but survival outside does not translate cleanly to survival inside. In here, reputation is currency, weakness is a liability, and the first day writes a legend people will spend weeks trying to test. The faint shiver in Willow's hand as she accepted her property bag, the way her eyes searched the corners of the intake room, the instinctive flinch when the clank of a distant cell door snapped like a trap, none of it went unnoticed. She understood that within hours her story would be told and retold by people who didn't know her name but would use it anyway. Drew has already paid his own toll to Pentonville and carries its scars like smuggled contraband. The memory of being ambushed there, the hot flash of pain, the awareness that help would come slower than the bleeding, did not dissipate when he walked free. He wears that knowledge openly now, and when he learned Willow would be sent to the same crucible, something inside him detonated. His anger was not wild, it was focused, precise, and practical. He drew a mental map of responsibility and marked target after target: Michael for miscalculations and silence at the wrong moments, Nina for choices that stacked dominoes in exactly the wrong sequence, the police for crafting a case that thatched together probability and paranoia, the prosecutor for being publicly righteous and privately political. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about pressure. He vowed that every person who pushed Willow toward those barred doors would help pull her back out again, whether they wanted to or not. Distance remakes love into speculation, and that's the punishment that hits families hardest. In the hours after Willow's transfer, Michael watched the front door to their home as if by refusing to blink he could reverse the fact that she wouldn't be walking through it. He catalogued the unthinkables: what if a cellmate decided to start a fight just to test the new girl? What if a guard looked away at the wrong moment? What if a rumor with Willow's name attached caught fire? And then he catalogued the things he could control. He could retain counsel who fought like reputation depended on it. He could court public sympathy without appearing to manipulate it. He could anchor their family so hard to a plan that no one could shake it loose. But as his list sharpened, so did Drew's gaze, and the old friction between them, brothers by circumstance, rivals by habit, found new oxygen. Each man believed he loved Willow the right way. Each man felt the other's plan was the one thing that might make everything worse. And then there is Nina, a name that complicates any room it enters. She knows the gravity of guilt, she has spent entire seasons of her life orbiting it. The idea that Willow might be cornered inside Pentonville by someone meaner or someone careless is a thought Nina can't fully look at without wincing. She replays conversations, evaluates bargains made in fear, reopens wounds she had armored over with bravado. People say they would do anything, Nina can list the anything she has already done. But repentance without action is theater, so she starts to work. Discreetly at first, calling in favors she never wanted to owe, more boldly as fear changes her sense of embarrassment into a weapon she's willing to use. She will not say she's trying to save Willow to make amends, and she will not ask for forgiveness as a transaction. She will simply move, toward influence, toward leverage, toward anyone who can tilt the scales, because if Willow is not safe, nothing else Nina has built can stand. Alexis understands systems, and she also understands what happens to people crushed beneath them. She has been inside enough courtrooms to know that law and justice are cousins who don't often speak. As word spreads that she may become Willow's counsel, a new kind of expectation clings to her. Alexis doesn't deal in miracles, she deals in statutes, precedent, and judges who might be persuaded to examine the gray space between a rule and its purpose. The denial of bail can be revisited, she explains to anyone who will listen and several who won't. Conditions can be tailored. Electronic monitoring exists for a reason. House arrest, medical exceptions, supervised release, there are safety valves if a court can be convinced to see a living person instead of a docket number. But arguments do not persuade on their own. They require narratives, and narratives require facts that breathe. Alexis starts to assemble a case that treats Willow not as an abstract risk but as a human being already paying for the panic of others. Meanwhile, Pentonville tests Willow in 100 small ways that add up to one large threat. A glance held too long at the wrong table during chow. A comment she didn't hear but someone insists she did. A bunk assignment that puts her one row away from a clique that feeds on rumor. She doesn't go looking for trouble, but trouble is curious and has excellent timing. The first confrontation is almost banal, an accusation over a seat, a shove that is half warning and half measuring stick, and Willow is startled by how quickly instinct takes over. She is capable of fierceness, life demanded she cultivate it. But she also understands the math of prison, one fight becomes a file note becomes a classification becomes a cage within a cage. She de-escalates, absorbs the insult, files faces and names away for later. Restraint is a form of resistance too. That night, as the block dissolves into a choir of coughs and murmurs, she discovers a rhythm to survival, slow breaths, eyes open, a mind counting backwards from 100 until the numbers mean nothing and sleep sneaks up on her anyway. Rumor travels faster than radio across Port Charles, and soon someone says Willow has been targeted, someone else says she provoked it, and a third person says both are true. The story mutates every time it changes hands. Drew learns versions he doesn't want to believe and decides not to wait for official confirmation. If the system insists on treating Willow like a danger to the community, then he will remind the system how dangerous a community can be when you endanger one of its own. He visits Alexis, not to plead but to collaborate. They discuss bail reform, case law, reversal standards, the statistical correlations between pretrial detention and bad outcomes neither of them wants to imagine. He meets Michael and lays out the difference between doing everything and doing the right things in the right order. He visits Nina because raw anger needs somewhere constructive to go, and if she truly wants to help, he will give her assignments that feel like penance and function like progress. There is a darker calculus that flickers at the edges of Willow's thoughts, one she hates herself for considering. If the judge was unmoved by arguments of community ties and family obligations, would a demonstration of risk change the equation? The idea is abhorrent, to bait danger just enough to show the court that danger exists. But victims have long been required to prove they can bleed before anyone will adjust the rules designed to protect them. Willow does not want to orchestrate anything, she wants to survive it. And in Pentonville, survival is theater whether she volunteers for the stage or not. Still, when the next confrontation arrives, sharper, meaner, freighted with a dare, she meets it with a steadiness that confuses her adversary. An officer notices the geometry of the moment, steps in early, and a report is written that manages to be both accurate and inadequate. It's enough to spark paperwork. Paperwork, in turn, is sometimes enough to spark a hearing. Outside, alliances bend into shapes no one would have predicted months ago. Lulu, still learning how to wield her voice after so much enforced silence, recognizes the power of a narrative that invites empathy instead of outrage. She does not intend to become a megaphone for Drew's grievances, but she will absolutely train her spotlight on the systemic gaps that put people like Willow in the crosshairs. A carefully crafted article, measured, sourced, humane, can convince those who will never read a legal brief. Lulu interviews experts, reaches out to victim advocates, even calls a former warden who talks about budget lines with an intimacy that makes readers uncomfortable. The draft reads less like sensationalism and more like civic instruction. When it publishes, it gives cover to officials who need political oxygen to make a different choice and puts heat on those who would rather keep their hands clean by doing nothing at all. In court, language changes lives. Alexis builds a petition that threads together personal history and legal opportunity, arguing that the conditions that purportedly make Willow a flight risk can be controlled more effectively outside the monotone cruelty of Pentonville than inside it. She points to the incident report as proof of volatility and to medical records as proof that volatility has consequences a jail is ill-equipped to manage. She offers GPS monitoring, daily check-ins, a curfew tight enough to choke on. She argues not from sentiment but from prudence. A person who is safer at home is a person who is likelier to appear in court able to participate in her own defense. The prosecution counters with lists and fear, as they always do, but their voice sounds smaller in a room where more people are paying attention than usual. Drew watches every word, Michael counts every minute, Nina presses a thumbnail into her palm to keep her face still, and Lulu notes the judge's questions with the precision of a surgeon measuring a cut. The decision will not end every problem. Even if bail is granted, even if the anklet chafes less than the cot, even if home replaces the echo of unfamiliar voices with the baby-soft chaos of family, the charges still exist and the trial looms. But the difference between preparing for a war in a cell and preparing for it in a living room is the difference between drowning and treading water. If the judge softens, it will be because Alexis handed the court a defensible route to decency and because the town, in its loud, messy way, reminded the bench that safety is not the property of locked doors alone. If the judge refuses, the plan recalibrates in an instant. Appeals are not romantic, but they can be relentless, and public scrutiny has a way of nudging obstacles an inch at a time until a new path appears. For Willow, hope is not a banner, it's a low, stubborn flame you cup with both hands. She will not confuse a favorable hearing with forgiveness or a release with absolution. She understands better than most that every mercy comes with a responsibility attached. But she also knows the power of a single yes after a parade of no's. It doesn't erase the fear she felt in a corridor that smelled like bleach and bad tempers. It doesn't rewrite the first night when she mistook the sound of footsteps for a threat. What it does is return a measure of choice to someone who has been starved of it, and choice is the first ingredient of dignity. She will take it, if offered, with clear eyes. She will wear the monitor, check the boxes, meet the dates, hold her family, and let her lawyer translate the chaos of accusation into the calm grammar of defense. And somewhere in the wings, the people who put her here, intentionally or through 1,000 casual nudges, will adjust their own math. Michael will rethink the intersections of strategy and secrecy. Nina will revise the price of penance and decide whether she can pay it without collapsing. Drew will learn the difference between force and leverage, and how often the latter creates more room to breathe. Alexis will file another motion with the same imperfect faith she brings to them all. Lulu will write another piece that treats readers like citizens. The show doesn't end with a door opening or a band snapping around an ankle, it accelerates. Pentonville will keep breathing nearby, waiting to remind everyone what is at stake if attention wanders. But for a moment, brief, bright, earned, Port Charles will look at Willow not as a problem to be processed but as a person to be protected. In a town where second chances are minted and spent daily, that is the most dangerous and necessary revelation of all.